Hey, what's going on, Steelers Nation? This is Big B, Brian Hanley, and welcome to Steelers Almighty, the fastest growing Steelers podcast on YouTube. We appreciate everybody being here today, man. Today, we got a good show for you. Let's talk about some of these topics here. First thing is Pat Freiermuth. Can he be a number 2 wide receiver? We're going to talk about the difference between number 2 wide receiver and actually a number 2 option. Can Pat Freiermuth dive into that? Second thing is this young offensive line. Are they ready? I think that's a big question that a lot of people have. Not to mention, a lot of people have that question, but it's one of those things where a lot of people are depending on a lot of these young guys early on. So we'll also talk about the James Daniels dilemma kind of dives into this young offensive line. His contract, obviously the Steelers are not renewing it, have told him according to James Daniels, that they are not going to give him an extension. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're also going to bring our man back, Chris James, CJ, to break down the quarterbacks in the AFC North and decide who's the best, who does what well, all this good stuff, and where Russell Wilson fits into that mix. So we'll have all of that and more today on Steelers Almighty. Remember, you can find Steelers Almighty on YouTube at youtube.com/Steelers Almighty. Also on all the social media platforms, you can find Steelers Almighty. And then to top that off, anywhere that you get a podcast, you can always find Steelers Almighty. Let's dive right into the show here, people. So appreciate you guys taking the time today. So first things first, can Pat Freiermuth be a wide receiver number 2? Well, the first thing that I would say is let's dive into and talk about the difference between being a wide receiver number 2 and an option 2, because I believe that obviously he can be the second option on this team. And look, a lot of teams do it. You don't just have to have the wide receiver number 2 and make that be the second passing option. There are plenty of teams around the league that do it exactly that way. And I think Pat Freiermuth has the skill set to be able to do that. I really think he does. When he's at his best, he can be the second option on what the Steelers are looking to do when they throw the football. So this need and this thirst to go out and find this big time second receiver and giving up draft capital and then having to spend a ton of money, I'm not saying that's still not an option. What I'm saying is Pat Freiermuth can be the second option while we still have a competent number 2 receiver. So keep that in mind. Now, one thing is Pat's got to be healthy. Look, I mean, that nothing can be done if he can't stay healthy. And then we saw a lot of that last year. It was unfortunate. Him not being able to stay healthy. Again, you don't blame guys for not being healthy or for being hurt. You can't just blame them for that. Nobody wants to be hurt. But, the old saying goes, the best ability is availability. So to be that second option, that's something that he's going to have to try to get under control the best he can, which I'm sure he is. Don't get me wrong. Like I mentioned before, nobody wants to get hurt. But yeah, he's going to have to try to stay healthy. And looking at the offense and what we're going to put around him in Arthur Smith, they feature tight ends. So Pat Freiermuth, for him to do his thing and be that second option, it's not a question on whether Arthur Smith will give him the opportunity. I mean, just take a look at this chart here, and what look like a guy like Delaney Walker did. I mean, yes, tight ends are featured so many of these years in Tennessee. And this is when Arthur Smith got into the Tennessee, the tight end room there. He featured the tight ends. They became a big part of what they did. I'm not saying this is all when he was the offensive coordinator, because he wasn't the offensive coordinator that long, but he was in the tight end room. That's where he started in Tennessee. And look what they did. Yeah. I mean, so you can do some damage in an Arthur Smith offense. He knows how valuable a tight end is. Pat Freiermuth is that good. He can be that good if given the ability. I don't even want to go down the road of talking about previous regimes and previous offensive coordinators and what they didn't do. We could have an entire show. We could probably have an entire month of shows talking about what Matt Canada didn't do. We don't want to go down that road. It gives us all Steeler fans PTSD. We don't need to do that. So Arthur Smith absolutely will feature a tight end, and Pat Freiermuth can be that. Now, another thing that we have to do is we got to extend him this year. I just think we got to extend him and get that over with. I believe before the season starts. There's a certain number of guys on the team this year that we can take a look at before the season starts to extend. Really, if we're being honest, the only one that I would do would be Pat Freiermuth. I'm not doing Cam Hayward. There's all this talk about Najee possibly getting a deal when we didn't pick up his 5th-year option. I don't think there's any way that they're going to extend him before the season when you wouldn't pick up the 5th year. So those crazy rumors out there are silly. But Pat Freiermuth is not. And if you want him to be around long term, which I'm pretty sure the Steelers want him to be around because he's proven to be that good, I think you go ahead and you extend him. So let's take a look at this poll. Pat Freiermuth. Looking at it, PFF has Pat Freiermuth as the 15th best tight end this season. Do you think that he has a breakout season under Arthur Smith? So do you think that Pat Freiermuth can have a breakout season and get higher than that 15 that PFF has him ranked him on? I know a lot of people don't like PFF. I'm not a guy that is in love with Pro Football Focus, but they do a lot of good things over there, and it is a good metric. So please leave your answers in the comments on what you think Pat Freiermuth will be able to do under this Arthur Smith offense. Let's move on here. So talking about offensive line, is it too young or is it okay? Are they ready? I've had a lot of conversations with people and leaving comments. They're asking, hey man, you're dependent a lot on 2 rookie guys. Well, let's take a deep dive into this. First of all, the offensive line being young is kind of contingent on whether Frazier and Fautanu, if they start. If they do, then yes, then the offensive line is young. If they don't, then this conversation is kind of a moot point. So let's consider for the time being that these guys start. Let's take a look at Troy Fautanu right now as being a day one starter. Look, they have named Broderick Jones the starter at left tackle. Those are all the reports that have come out. Not to mention in the offseason, Omar Khan came out and said that Broderick Jones was going to be our left tackle. So since he's going to be the left tackle, now it's a battle between Dan Moore Jr. and Troy Fautanu. Now, look, Dan Moore Jr. basically came out this offseason and said he views himself as a left tackle. He tried to play right tackle and couldn't do it. He doesn't want to play right tackle. Troy Fautanu, on the other hand, came out and said, yeah, I'm more comfortable playing right tackle. I'll play anywhere on the line that you want me to play. I'm very comfortable at right tackle. I think that battle needs to be won from day one, not one that we need to be messing around with, and put the guy out there that wants to be there, not to mention has the most talent. It's not a knock on Dan Moore Jr. He's a very serviceable guy, but the Steelers, if they didn't have a problem with the tackles, they wouldn't have drafted 2 tackles this past year, or the past 2 seasons, I should say. They never would have done that if the Steelers didn't have issues at tackle. Let's just leave it at that. We don't need to bash anybody or anything like that. Let's just talk the truth. Steelers took 2 tackles because they needed 2 tackles. Period. End of story. And they took them in the first round. They didn't wait till the 5th round or 6th round. You're not taking 2 tackles in the first round to sit those guys. That's why Fautanu's got to be out there immediately. Now, you look at a guy like Zach Frazier. Starting a rookie center, yeah, I get it. That can be risky. But at the same time, he's not new to the position. He's been playing this position and playing it well for quite some time. Get the terminology down. Once you do that, then let everything else fall into place. He can be the second eyes out there. Not to mention, he is going to be playing right next to James Daniels and Isaac Siamala, 2 guys that are veterans that are right there that can help him. That matters. That absolutely matters, being the centerpiece. So while you're a rookie and while you're new, when you have 2 veterans, and Isaac is very good, and James is no slouch, and we'll get into a little bit of that later, while you have those 2 guys right there, yes, let that play out a little bit. Let them help. Do those things. So I think you got to get Zach Frazier out there immediately. I know right now we're looking at the depth chart, and they have Nate Herbig. Hey, I got it right. Nate Herbig. Instead of, I was talking about Nick Herbig 100 times last week, and I kept saying Nate. Today, we're actually talking about Nate. Bottom line is, you got to get Zach Frazier out there. You got to put him on the field immediately. If it takes offensive line time to gel, well, the time to gel is in practice. Time to gel is in the preseason. So get them out there, let them get as many reps together as humanly possible and put them out there. Look at the Steelers' schedule, man. We know how tough the end of that schedule is. So if there is an easy part, it's the first 8 games, first 9 games. Well, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to go out there and wait and sit for 4, 5, 6 weeks before they get out there, then to have to deal with the meat of the schedule? Or would you like for them to get out there early, whatever lumps they're going to have, let's try to get those out of the way and then move forward? Yes, there is such a thing as a rookie wall. I'm not saying that there isn't. But if the Steelers are trying to go to where they're trying to go, the best 5 offensive linemen got to be on the field. And the best 5 offensive linemen on this football team, 2 of them happen to be rookies. Get them out on the field as soon as possible. That's all I'm saying. How good can they be? I mean, if we're being honest with ourselves and we're really wanting to talk about how good the Steelers can be, man, look at how good the Steelers line became last year. It got better. And I know we're talking about replacing 2 guys, Mason Cole and Dan Moore Jr., but we're replacing with guys that are just better. They are. Now, they haven't played a snap of NFL football. I understand that. So me going out there saying they're better is crazy talk. I get that. But just looking at the physical attributes and how you believe they're going to translate to this level, they're better. They just are. Get them out there on the field. I think this could be a top 10 offensive line. I really do. And I know there's going to be people out there say, Brian, the fandom is just absolutely insane. It's really not. It's really not. Broderick Jones, really good. Look at Isaac Siamala, really good. If you look at Zach Frazier, we'll see how good he is, but he's an upgrade over Mason Cole. I don't care what anybody says. He's an upgrade, period. End of story. James Daniels, average guard. And then Troy Fautanu. I mean, he's better than Dan Moore Jr. He just is. I'm sorry, people. And that's a guy that's got 49 starts in the NFL, but he's better than him. So I think this line, if done right, if they get him out there early and get the reps in and don't mess around with all the rookie's got to earn it. Yeah, the rookie's got to earn it, but give them the opportunity. Give them the first opportunity to earn it. And if they go out there and do that, yeah, I think the Steelers got something here, man. I think they have a top 10 line that they can make work. I really, really believe that. So let's move on. So in the next dip, we've got James Daniels, the James Daniel dilemma. Well, look, James Daniels is a guy that the Steelers, they don't have an offensive lineman, or should I say under that they're not going to extend a contract to. They've got James Daniels doing that. And it's a weird situation. And here's what I mean by a weird situation. They have told him, according to James Daniels, we're not going to extend you. Okay, I understand that. But I hate saying this because I think James Daniels he's a good player. He's an average guard. He's ranked. And if you do anything with Pro Football Focus, like I said, whether you like it or not, okay, that's fine. But he's ranked 33rd out of 79, which a little bit above average, but let's just call it average. He's average guard. Okay. But now you start looking at other things and like looking at, and you can see his pro football grades there. It's like you start looking at what he's done over the last couple of years since he's gotten to the Steelers. His play has dipped. It's gotten worse. So while he's a good player or an average player, his play has gotten worse. Now he's making almost $9 million this year. Okay. Now, if you've paid any attention at all at what offensive guards has started to make, you'll know that, Lord have mercy, the salaries have gone up. And good for them. Don't get me wrong. It's good for offensive guards. And we've talked about on a previous episode, please go check that out if you haven't, on any previous episode. Last week, we talked about the Steelers and spending money on the offensive side of the football. Okay. Do you want to pay $15, $16, $18 million for James Daniels to play right guard for you? I would bet the answer to that is no. But look at this chart here. It's almost going to command that. I mean, think about that for a second. He's 10th on this list at 8.9. And he's exactly what you're looking for. Don't get me wrong. 27-year-old, so he's fairly young. He's a veteran in this league. Played good football, At some point, though, the Steelers, just like every other team, there's going to be some guys that are going to be on your roster that you're going to have to pay that are not going to be top dollar and still they're good football players. James Daniels would fall into that category. And I think any right guard, or at least on this Pittsburgh Steeler team, based on where salaries are going, that's just a position that we're not going to be paying top dollar for that position. I'm sorry. You can't pay everybody. You just can't. And as much as we would like to keep James Daniels on the roster, this is his last year in Pittsburgh. It just is. No way are the Steelers going to pay him, like I said, anywhere between $14 and $18 million. And he's going to command that. I mean, he is. Again, a 27-year-old with all this starting experience. Yeah, he's going to command that because that's the going market. The Steelers don't have to do that. They don't have to do that. They have McCormick in the back burner that they can draft, or that they have already drafted, that they can plug and play. They love him, what he's done. Now, again, we've only seen OTAs and minicamp, so we haven't seen what the pads come on. So we'll be able to see that. And maybe things change. Pads come on. Who knows? They also like Spencer Anderson. So we'll check that out too. But as far as James Daniels is concerned, it's just tough to be able to say that you're going to pay a right guard that kind of money. And again, he's an average guy, good player. And when I say average guy, I mean he's an average guard. He's a good player. He's fine. But for 14 to 18 million next year and beyond, not a chance. Not a chance. Not something that the Steelers should be interested in doing. And I don't even think, like I said, James Daniels has come out. Yeah, he said he's had no contract talks at all about an extension. I'm pretty sure the Steelers have drawn the line there and just said, we're moving on. We want you to be here this year. And that's a good thing. A lot of people might think, well, maybe he's disgruntled. No, he's not. He's not disgruntled because James Daniels is playing for a contract. That's the thing. He knows he's not going to get it in Pittsburgh. He wants to go get the bag somewhere else. God bless him. Go get it somewhere else. But that means he's got to have a good year this year. So anybody who's thinking because we're not giving him a contract extension that he's going to put it in the tank, no, he's not. Unless he's retiring, which I'm guessing he ain't retiring. He's going to want to have as good a year as possible to be able to go get the bag. What do they always say? Guys play their best on a contract year. Well, dagnabbit, this is James Daniels' contract year. Let's see if he can make that happen for us. So here's the poll question. Do you believe the Steelers need to secure James Daniels beyond this season? I kind of answered that question for you, but I will let you guys answer that in the chat. Please leave all your answers in the comment section. Do you believe that the Steelers need to secure James Daniels beyond this season? So appreciate you guys answering that. And thank you guys for always answering all those poll questions in the previous podcasts that we do, man. It's always fun listening to or looking at those comments and answering you guys. So I thank you guys for taking the time. So let's move on now. Next up, man, we have got Chris James, my man CJ. He is breaking down AFC North quarterbacks. We brought him back. He was on our section last week talking about the quarterbacks here and was there a battle between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Today, he's going to break down all four quarterbacks within the division. He'll give you an answer at the end on who he thinks is the best and all that good stuff. So we appreciate you guys bringing in CJ now. Chris James, my man CJ. Again, just so everybody understands, CJ, he is a senior analyst at Football Game Plan. He also has fantasy football analyst at Pix 11 in New York City. He's the host of Chopping It Up CJ, a podcast that's also available wherever you get your podcast, and Football Writers of America Association member. CJ, how are you doing today, my man?
Doing very well, Big B. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you again for joining us. You know, we're talking about this AFC North, man. It is just, first of all, the division in general is just insane. Absolutely insane. Last year, I said it was going to be the best division in football, and it was clearly the best division in football. I think it's going to be the same thing again this year. I wouldn't even be surprised, CJ, if everybody from this division makes the playoffs. I know people think, oh, it's not a possibility. I'm like, yeah, actually, it is a possibility. And not to mention, everybody had a winning record last year. So it is a possibility. Taking a deep dive into this, let's start off with the first question here. Cleveland. You know, I don't know. Can Deshaun Watson, can he find what that magic that he had back in Houston? Is that something that he's capable of doing? Because it's been 4 years since we've seen that. Is he capable of getting that back?
Sure. So I want to start here.
Okay.
If anyone remembers how good Deshaun Watson is, they should also understand how horrible this marriage was with scheme and player. Deshaun Watson has been since his Clemson days. They weren't running heavy play action. It's been a spread situation where he's able to see the field, not turn his back, and make decisions from there, usually second act decisions, right? Read one's not there, read two's not there, bang, either take off or get to another place. This offense is completely opposite of what he does as a strength. So other quarterbacks thrived in it. This season, because both Stefanski and Watson need it, they have to blend together his strengths with that offense's goal, and almost the best thing possible, Nick Chubb being slow out the gates, because I don't think he'll be ready for the first couple of weeks of the season. They won't be able to rely on that run game. They'll have to go to a more Watson-centric offense, and I think that'll actually get him back into his groove.
Right. Yeah. And I've heard some reports, you know, out of their mini camps, OTAs and all that stuff, that they are doing a lot more shotgun stuff just for what you said, to get him in a better position to where he can make plays and see the field better. You know, it's just different. If you've never done it, and then all of a sudden you're throwing it, especially at the highest level, and you're being asked to change your style. It's not that Deshaun Watson is dumb, or because that's what people want to say. It's like, that doesn't mean that. It just means he's never played where he's had to turn his back to the defense. Everything's always been in front of him. So going from 1, 2, 3, 4, things are a lot easier than when you have to turn your back, play action, come back around, and then try to go to 1, 2, 3, 4. Things just, and first of all, it happens a lot faster. So that's the one thing. And then just everything meshing together just wasn't a good mesh. You're right. But I think maybe they can figure something out. I'm just not sure. I just, you know, I hear this a lot of times from people. Sometimes when people get the bag, and Deshaun Watson got the bag, sometimes they just say, you know what? It is what it is. Maybe I'll get better. Maybe I won't. You don't think that maybe he's that guy, but we haven't seen it, CJ. So I just don't know. It's
a natural thing for, I think it's called shirking is the terminology. Yeah. So it's a natural thing that happens. It's not intentional. These guys just, you're going to be more you're going to eat more when you're hungry. How about that?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, and as far as Deshaun Watson's intelligence, I'm fairly certain he graduated in 2.5 years from his undergrad and qualified for the Senior Bowl after 3 years of playing. And the same year when Trubisky didn't even qualify, and he was a full year older. But anyway.
That's a different conversation for a different day. I'm right there with you. So let's talk about the next quarterback. Look, the two-time MVP, Lamar Jackson. We've seen it in this division. Look, as Steeler fans, we're not afraid of Lamar Jackson. You know, we got Lamar Jackson's number. You know, it's almost like he can't beat us. Having said that, he's still the two-time defending MVP, but he's a two-time MVP. He won it last season. In a year that, you know, me and you had discussed previously on different podcasts, it wasn't a great year for quarterbacks last year. It just wasn't one of those, hey, guys are throwing for 5,000 yards all over the place. It was just a little bit of a different year, and he ended up winning the award. And in my opinion, they've kind of just made this thing a quarterback award now. When you gave it to him, okay, that's fine. But what's his next progression? What does Lamar Jackson need to do to try to get over the hump because, yes, he won the MVP, but he hasn't been to the Super Bowl. And if we're being honest, he hasn't really even played well in playoff games. What does he need to do?
So people are going to come at me for this, but you know what? I'm ready for it.
Yes.
You know who he parallels very closely to in almost every way? Peyton Manning. Through their first 6 playoff games, Peyton Manning was 2-4. He actually lost his first 3. Looks like Lamar Jackson, right? He's also 2-4 through his first 6 playoff games. 2-time MVP. Guess who was also a 2-time MVP over that stretch? Peyton Manning, who also had the moniker of couldn't win the big game, couldn't get it done. And by the way, in his first 3 playoff games combined, Peyton Manning completed less than 50% of his passes. What couldn't Lamar Jackson do? His play dropped off in the playoffs also. It parallels way too closely to Peyton Manning. And it's because these guys are football savants. There's a lot of pressure on their plate. And what happens is these teams just expect them to carry things. Even if they're trying to help, they expect them to carry things. So I think last year was a big teaching lesson for Lamar and for the Ravens as a whole. I think that he's going to be completely fine because they'll continue to progress and allow him to be the guy that he's always been, a great quarterback with his arm. And they got that bell cow, that thumper in the backfield, just in case their offensive coordinator forgets to run the ball. Derrick Henry will cast a shadow and say, "Hey, coach, I'm here."
Yeah, that was that AFC Championship game looked ugly last year, just refusing to run the football when they are actually running the football, they're having a lot of success and they just stopped doing it. But either way, like I said, Steeler fans, we don't care. We thought that was a great game. Not to mention, like I said, Lamar Jackson's got trouble with the Steelers, man. He's had trouble with us, so we're okay. We feel good about it. Like I said, I think he's a great quarterback. He's got a lot to still prove, but we're not afraid. We're just not afraid of LJ. Speaking of quarterbacks that aren't afraid, look, Joe Burrow, great quarterback. I've said this. A lot of other people have said this about Joe Burrow, and I think it's a fair statement to make. Joe Burrow's injury prone. For so long, people have said Lamar Jackson's injury prone. Joe Burrow's been injured more than Lamar Jackson, and the injuries have been worse, and he's been out longer. Is it fair to say that Joe Burrow is injury prone at this point?
You can say it because it goes along with it, right? Usually, at least in my estimation, I wouldn't say it only because usually it's the same type of injuries. So if you continuously have soft tissue injuries, you're injury prone, that type of thing. He just has awkward injuries. The first one was because they forgot to take care of either guard. They didn't have any guards, so someone went through his knee. But this last one was concerning because there was nothing. No contact, no nothing. So that one actually concerned me. But prior to that, I would have never thought of it. But I think it's fair to, if you want to assert that, it's fair now because non-contact injuries that keep you out for the rest of the season, that's awkward.
Yeah. So that's my thing is that it's just like non-contact. I know it was his wrist, but last time I checked, the quarterback needed a wrist to throw the football. So, a non-contact for that, it's problematic, very problematic. Here's a thing that I think a lot of people touch on, CJ, is, there's outstanding quarterback play. First of all, in this division, all 4 teams are really, really good. Okay. The quarterbacks, the Steelers, you could say the Steelers have the 4th best quarterback in this division. Now, it may not play out that way. We actually might get better play. So, okay, if we do, but let's just say they do have the 4th best quarterback, even though all the teams are really good. Can you win this division if you are the 4th best quarterback in this division?
Absolutely, because, and I think you've mentioned it before, and you're wearing the Steelers on you, they've been able to have a winning record with Duck Hodges at quarterback. They just need competent play. Not to throw any shade at this young man, but a Brock Purdy with San Francisco. San Francisco wasn't carried by Brock Purdy. He just got the job done. But he could have been, he's at least the 3rd best quarterback in that division. If, arguably for some people could be the 4th, but they got to the Super Bowl. So the same thing here. The Steelers have always had a tough team. They're built well on defense. They've stacked the offense this year to go very well with a new OC who that's his job. That's what he does really well in Arthur Smith. All you have to do is play above competent football and you can actually compete late into the playoffs, even in the AFC.
Yeah. That's what I think, because the defense, especially with Pittsburgh, our defense is so good. Cleveland, even though I hate saying it, their defense is so good. We know the Ravens defense is good. And the Bengals defense fell off a little bit. It may be better this season. I think they may have added a couple of pieces. So we'll see how good their defense is. But I think that's the difference. Most of the time when you're talking about, teams in a division, all the defenses aren't any good. So you can say, okay, well, if you're on a team to where you have the fourth best quarterback, then your defense may not be good. So you're not winning. So you can't do that. Well, when your defense is so good, you can get by with having the fourth best. Again, it doesn't mean bad quarterback play. And I think that's where people make the distinction. Fourth best doesn't mean you're bad. It just means three are just better than you. I go, and that can be okay as long as everything stacks up. As long as you continue to play well, there can just be other guys better. So I'm glad you made that distinction there. My last question, and again, this is probably the one that everybody wants to know. Who's the best quarterback in the division?
Ooh. So I did a quarterback ranking recently, and these guys are right next to each other. Burrow and Lamar Jackson. I'll put it like this. At this exact moment, who would I prefer? I'd prefer Lamar Jackson. It's because I know that he can put more on his plate. Even though I love how Burrow does carry a team, he brings bravado. He's like a Tom Brady. People believe more with a guy like him. But that wrist injury, I don't care what anyone says, that concerns me until I see him come out and ball again and not have that happen. So at this moment, I take Lamar Jackson. I would not lose any sleep if he had to give me Joe Burrow. I got to see Deshaun Watson return to form. And heck, if you force me to have Russell Wilson, I'll be A-okay with that, considering I'm a Saints fan.
I totally understand. That's the thing, man. Us Steelers Almighty here, we try to be as honest as possible, man. The thing that I have tried to stress to people is, yes, Russell Wilson was in a bad situation, kind of what you've mentioned before. Yes, some of it was on him, but a lot of it's tough. Just think about your everyday job or what you do. If you knew for a fact that your direct boss did not want you there, and your ownership of the company that you work for, number one, wanted you to take a pay cut, and they don't want you there, it's tough to go and perform every single week when you have to perform. And that was what Russell Wilson was under last year. I mean, if you can, and again, I'll get you out of here on this, just kind of describe how tough Russell Wilson had it last year, CJ.
I mean, he's coming off a year even prior where nothing blended well. Everything went south. Right. He was trying to fit in. And then you get into this situation. Russell Wilson had to deal with an offense that was not designed for his strengths and his skill set. With what Sean Payton does, he runs much more of a horizontal game than a vertical game.
Right.
I think he got used to late career Drew Brees. And all Russell Wilson came in and did, and I think he had 2 of the 5 most difficult completions in the entire NFL last year, and touchdown completions. The one to Sutton in the corner of the end zone on like a Monday night, he was insane for what he was asked to do. So if Russell Wilson plays like that for Pittsburgh is a real deal contender for the AFC Championship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for your time again, CJ. We appreciate you, man. Again, we'll always have you back whenever you have the opportunity, and we're breaking down quarterbacks. We will have you back. So I appreciate it. And thank you. All right, man. Who is the best QB in the AFC North? That is the poll question that I have for everybody. So please leave your answers in the comments section. Is it Joe Burrow? Is it Lamar Jackson? Is it Deshaun Watson? Or is it Russell Wilson? Leave your answers in the comments on who is the best quarterback in the AFC North. Look, in closing here, I kind of want to circle back and talk about this wide receiver 2 versus option number 2 again. Look, I think it's something that the Steelers absolutely have to lean into. And I want to make the distinction and let everybody know I'm not crazy. I'm not saying that the Steelers don't need to have a number 2 receiver. I'm not saying that at all. They absolutely must have a number 2 receiver on the outside, somebody competent to play the position. But what I am saying is that Pat Freiermuth can absolutely be the number 2 option. And there is a distinct difference between a number 2 receiver and the number 2 option. Look at the Chiefs. Now, granted, you're going to say, well, Brian, Travis Kelce is one of the greatest tight ends to ever play, if not the greatest. Okay, that's fine. But the bottom line is when Tyreek Hill was here, Tyreek Hill was still the number 1 guy, but the second option was Travis Kelce. I mean, and it's look at New England. When New England in their heyday, they had the number 1 and the number 2 option were tight ends. So yes, a tight end can be that. Look at Baltimore and what they're doing. The number 2 option is a tight end. Okay. And to a lesser extent, San Francisco, because if you have Christian McCaffrey back there, he's going to be your number 1 option. You talk about throwing the football. Okay, Brandon Ayuk, and I am not, let me repeat, not going to keep throwing out any clickbait about Brandon Ayuk like you probably hear all over the place. I'm just not doing it. Until it happens, you're not going to hear me talk anything about that, man. I'm just not doing it. Sorry, not doing it. Either way, back to the point is that George Kittle, he had over 1,000 yards last year. So you take CMC out of the equation there when they're throwing the football. Yeah, George Kittle's the number 2 option. Yeah, he had more yards and more catches than Deebo Samuel did. So he had over 1,000 yards. So it can be done. It happens all over the place. The Steelers can do the exact same thing. Look, if they're not going to go make this trade for some other receiver and pay him a ton of money, which I don't think they should. I think they're crazy if we do that. The bottom line is lean into Pat Freiermuth. Get him extended and use the offense. We got Arthur Smith here. You know he loves tight ends. Let him use it. Let Russ use the tight end to his advantage. Use those things and then see where we're at. Maybe we make a trade during the season if things aren't working. Maybe we do something different. I just don't believe we have to give up our future to go find this other top-notch receiver or supposed top-notch receiver and then pay him a ton, give up draft capital. We can have a number 2 option because that's all we're really looking for, isn't it? We don't really care if the number 2 option is a receiver or not, do we? We just want a really good number 2 option. And I think Pat Freiermuth can be that, man. So that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Thank you guys again for tuning in to Steelers Almighty, man. We appreciate it. As always, you can always find Steelers Almighty at youtube.com/Steelers Almighty. Anywhere that you get a podcast, you can find Steelers Almighty. And on all the social media platforms, Steelers Almighty is out there. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, comment, and also hit that notification bell so you know when Steelers Almighty is coming out with a new episode. We appreciate you guys. Love the support. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, man, Steelers Almighty is the fastest growing podcast on YouTube, and it's all because of you guys. I appreciate you. Love you. Aloha.